Mayor.
Come in late.
You're live.
Where is he right? Oh, he's talking to Rick. All right. Shall we go ahead and start without the mayor?
Yep.
All right. So I'll call the meeting to order. Are you doing the minutes, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Did y'all get a chance to look over the compensation policy? And there are a few changes. The highlighted areas have been changed. And if I understand it correctly, it's to change the authority for Nixon something. I'm not sure I understood it. I was doing three things at once when he called me and told me. At the village and chief of police discretion, wage increases instead of just everything through the mayor, and he will take
With his approval.
with his approval, but he will take your advice and recommendations because he trusts you and your jobs.
I actually worded that different. Go ahead. You're fine.
Okay.
So in the past, the reason why I worded it different, which I'm sorry I didn't bring that copy with me, but I just put at the discretion of the administrator and the chief of police, obviously over supervisor. And the reason why is council approves the salary range, and in the past, at the police department end, we were having mayor approval for raises, and then there, when I had first taken over as chief, right there at 19, I was having the mayor sign off on some raises, and he said, these were approved by council, you really don't need my signature. And I know in the past, there were some raises that didn't necessarily happen because we were waiting on mayor to sign off, or there was just some misunderstanding possibly, I don't know, but I was told by the mayor after I took the office was, if it's approved and it doesn't go outside of it, you don't need my signature or anything. Obviously bring it to my attention, but it already has approval because that's your salary range and we entrust that to the supervisor to do that. So that's why I worded it different, but feel free to.
Okay, so did you read what is underlined in our thing, and that's?
Well, that's why way the administrator worded it
Okay, that was
was
a
with
yes or no question.
I didn't hear what you said then.
The
Did I read?
way it's worded here works with what you said?
No.
Or you want, okay.
No, I worded it different. I took out the approval by mayor. It was just at the direction of the administrator or police chief, as long as it was in the range approved by council and the mayor prior.
Adopted by village council for
Yes.
each employee under their direction to the mayor for approval.
So just take out for approval.
Yeah, I took out for approval, but
Yeah,
again.
what do you guys think?
Well, what really does under the direction to the mayor mean?
So
I
took.
mean, it can almost, to me, if that's what we're going with, I mean, it could almost be cut off
Yeah.
after village council.
That's what I did in the draft that I have. I just.
Okay.
So that last phrase, for each employee under their direction to the mayor for approval, can be eliminated?
What
Got that?
what Mr. Whitaker said right there, adopted by village
By
council.
village council?
Yep, I put a period there and I did take out that last sentence, and that was my correction.
Okay,
I just didn't get it finished
Ben,
because I ended
good
up
for
doing
you.
something else.
It's fine for me.
okay. Okay,
And
What
if
else?
anything, if you were to get to the top of those ranges, then you would have to come to the council for,
That's correct. We have no authority to go over the
Okay.
pay range. Yep.
right.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Makes our job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then on page 4, we also have to the mayor for approval. Do we need to change that to?
I would, if you're changing the one, yeah.
I think a decrease, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think a decrease in pay, maybe we have outside, like maybe some more eyes on it to kind of understand what we're doing before we go cutting somebody's pay, just kind of like, but it's up to, I mean, that's up to you. Because usually when you decrease somebody's pay, which I've never done, is going to
Yeah, I was
come with a
gonna
little
say,
bit of
how many times
pushback.
does that even happen?
It hasn't, but it's in here, so I was trying to work with what it was saying.
So
I didn't-
keep
I
the
didn't-
mayor approval there in case.
I thought
we
mayor
would
and
have to
council
go
should
to
have to approve
him
that.
and state our case, why we want to
So he was.
decrease pay, someone's pay, so I would keep that in.
because
he would-
chances are then it's coming to us and the mayor.
At-
So it's
Probably.
probably best to,
So we're
I would leave that as is.
Yep.
So we're judge and jury on that one.
The only living
On
example
the
I have of
decrease more
that,
than anything.
we
right?
had a paid part-time officer that was at the probationary period, and we were going to probationary release them. They were paid. We had said, hey, if you want to resign from that, come back as a non-paid auxiliary for a short amount of time, see if you can pick it up. We'll do that. And that was the one time and only time we had done something like at the police department end. So but that was, that's the only thing I have to give as an example. But that was obviously done through the mayor, and everybody. Sorry.
Okay, the next one for the cost of living adjustment, 1 to 5% as agreed and adopted annually by village council.
That already happened.
That happens, yeah, it happens every.
So that's just added to
That's
what we
just
already
added.
had? Okay.
Yeah, it was not in there, so I just.
So it's.
Yeah, we just
okay.
stuck it in there, yeah.
Okay. And then on page 5,
Yeah, this is where. Yeah, this is where. Yeah, this is where I stopped working, but I had a different mindset on it.
that doesn't look like anything that needs to be,
So I like using the term the annual employee review since we were trying not to, well, I'm sorry, I don't have it laid out, so I'm not going to get into it. That'd be a different angle, sorry.
are you on page 5?
Yes,
Okay.
but I have
Old,
No,
I think
I have a
what
couple
was,
different.
what that was for was that paragraph included coming back to council for council's approval for raises,
For,
which council already sets the ranges, so it kind of covers it up in here that we have the authority to
go to the top of the
increase-
range, but
we
in
cannot
order
go out of
to-
the range,
in
basically.
order to increase the range, then you would obviously need to come back to council.
to increase the range.
Right.
Yes, that would have to come back to council,
Okay.
but before it was saying that any type of increase, we would recommend to the mayor, and then it would come back to you guys for approval, which you guys already did approve it by setting the range, so
Right.
we just took that portion out of that.
Okay.
Now, the only thing I can think of would be, maybe we would want to see, okay, if there's 10 employees over and, the front office, there's 6 or 8 policemen, and we've come up with, here's the amount that, we're saying they're going to be increased or decreased, whatever it may be. I kind of feel like, just with looking at the finances, I know we have approved ranges, this is where people should be paid according to a lot of different things. I kind of feel like if we see a total amount, if it's going to raise $10,000 this year, I almost think we need to look at the budget, make sure we're good, sign off, okay, move forward, to me.
Okay.
And that's in
And
there.
I think that's kind of what this
little-
is saying.
Yeah, I mean, according to, and we'll take in consideration the finances
and
and
budget of the
you know.
village,
Right.
right.
So that was actually the angle I was going. I don't like the dangling carrot. Like, for example, our top pay, we had fiscal officer and crunch numbers, and we can afford to pay everybody at that rate across the board for X amount of time. So my idea is, depending on where they enter at, usually after somebody gets off their 6-month probation, we give a wage increase, and then at 1 year get a wage increase. What I see is if we don't, I see people that aren't, if we can afford to pay that, then we should say, hey, this is the time, once you work here, you're going to be at the maximum salary range, right? And if we can't afford to pay more than that, then that's just where it's at. I get the COA increases their stuff, but I want, like, for example, I want my officers, the top pay, 2 years, there's no reason why at the top pay that we have for an officer, everybody shouldn't be topped out in 2 years, with the exception of an annual employee review. So at a 6-month, they get a probationary review. That's, if they're not meeting standards, we boot them out or we put them on what's called a PIP. So that would freeze any wage increases. We would word that right. And then at 1 year, when they got their annual review, if they didn't meet standards on anything, again, another personal improvement plan, some sort of improvement plan where it's got, usually 3 to 6 months where they're revised. If they don't meet the standards and they don't get a wage increase then when they meet the standard, they get the wage increase they're qualified for. And then after that, they go to, does it be 24 months or if we even did 36, which is 3 years, I just feel like that's a little long. And then they're topped out. After that, their wage may increase by COA or something, but that's how we have to control those wages. Because if not, as the past it looks like, you have an unbalance. You have one section that they're at the 90th percentile of their pay scale, and you have another employee that where they're only setting at 60%. For example, when we talked about wages in 19, we had 3 that we had to raise it up to. I get it. I know that's why we're working on this, but I don't want to see that. Plus, and it's black and white, right? This is what you get, and then if you don't qualify, then there's a reason, and we've documented it. I'd like to see that. If 2 years is too short, then maybe we do 2.5, or I hate to see any longer than 3. But that makes sense?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was just getting at, and I guess, I mean, we could handle that when we set the wage ranges each year. You know, we can get those okayed by the fiscal officer at that time, and, you know, she should be able to tell us, okay, if everyone was at the top, can we afford this moving forward? Yeah. So, I think we can take care of that when we do our part.
Yeah, and we're constantly looking to improve anyway, obviously, and advance ourselves. We don't want to be stagnant, but in the same token, being stagnant is what sometimes has prevented us from maintaining people. So it pushes all of us to just keep improving and be able to maintain it, or it stops us from hiring new people. But my goal, obviously, is to increase the employee base across the board, not just PD, but the village-wide, right?
Right.
So.
And that's addressed every budgetary cycle, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, we do that each year.
What's that? The
pay range.
Set the ranges.
Oh yeah, I like the biannual on that, but annual's okay. I just feel like seems like you're constantly working on it. You do it annually, but I like to biannually, especially if we're getting people raises and paying them, you know, in time. It gives us a little bit of time, not have to do so much paperwork. That's totally at the discretion of you guys. That's just my suggestion. I had the original draft from the Ohio plan where I just kind of went back to that original because I noticed some of the acronyms and wording were different. I was just kind of playing with the 3 of them, his revised version, the revised version, and the original draft, and just trying to blend it. Unfortunately, I didn't get that finished today because we've been working back and forth. He and I had put something together, and again, just fine tuning. So kind of glad we only got a little bit of time. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely have it finished in a
Okay.
week. Sorry.
Okay. So the compensation policy is something we're chew on for now?
Well, when we had the longevity raises, I thought my thoughts, and it looked like it was a unanimous thing. Again, I was trying to look, for example, COLA. If you say you maxed at 5%, and then say we gave a percentage for evaluation, which I don't think is the right way to go. That on the one it had 3%, and then if you had a longevity anywhere, you've got an employee that may or may not be getting an 11% raise, and that's kind of like a bias and kind of supervisor bias thing a little bit. So to help take that out, I thought longevity we could reward at 5 years, every 5 years basically. We originally had talked about that large number there. I've since my thought was to decrease it only because I wanted to possibly bring on more employees. So I was thinking capping it at 5 period, but making it, at the 10 be 5, and then just kind of repeats it like 5K, but those are just numbers used. But again, talk about it later. But I thought rewarding employees at that was nice, and it was a good retention. It also helps save on an hourly rate. You're not paying time and a half, but you're still rewarding them some sort of monetarily.
I would agree with that. I think those are definitely high to me.
Yeah, I like 25, 2 or 2.5 at 5 years. At 10 years, I thought $5,000, but I didn't think we pushed past that, for example, because if we have 5 employees at that, and maybe you could even bring that down a little bit, but I think 5,000, if you do the math on that divided by 2080, which is the hours that you work at on a 40-hour work week, that's not too hateful. But in the same token, we wanted this to be for employees, period. We just had to figure out what was acceptable and how much they worked versus, for example, council folks, if you guys are employees, you guys get a $5,000 check every 5 years. Well, I would say no, but that's just me. But
That's never going to happen.
You got a guy working 2 days a month.
Salary.
Yeah, you got somebody working 2 days a month part-time. I don't necessarily know they should be getting a bump like that. But like, for example, our part-time officers have to work a minimum 24 hours a month. So I figure we find some sort of happy median to, hey, as long as you meet X amount of hours as a part-time, you qualify for this as long as there's no been break in service. You still work here because we reward them, But again, we just have to iron that out a little bit.
Right. We can talk to the council about that.
Yep. I just didn't want to get a percentage on the longevity because I think that's a dangerous.
I mean, to me, I think the percentage is a better route to go based on your salary instead of a set lump sum. You know, I don't necessarily think that a part-time water clerk should get a $10,000 bonus at a certain amount of years.
I agree. That's why I shut the 10K out. I honestly didn't want to go above 5, but I thought that shouldn't be really awarded until at least, 10 years. But again, if you control the salary ranges and we keep them reasonable, $5,000 is not a whole lot on a like I said, a full-time working schedule. But again, we could implement if you're here part-time, if you don't meet these hours, you get this. You can do whatever you want. I was thinking at a full-time employee level when I was coming up with the numbers. But we did meet with the mayor, and we all kind of thought maybe the 10K might be a little high. Sorry.
Okay. Enough for tonight?
Good with me.
Okay, so.
What would you like to see on the longevity? Maybe lower the numbers and then maybe find a max point and then just have that carry over like I was saying, or you like the percentage? I was trying to save on overtime and just things of that nature. That's why the one lump sum really helps. Plus, it's not an annual occurrence. You've got to,
Right.
kind of,
I don't know. I got to think about it.
and I'll put something together and come up with some more numbers for you, and we'll play with it.
Okay. And I'll need a motion to adjourn.
Questions from the audience?
Do we have anything else that we need to think about before the next one?
Because we've got, well.
So this
we've
is
got-
the current rates.
Right. This is what the mayor calculated out. Do you want to,
Yeah, sure. All I did, Jeremy, was I got from our fiscal officer what the current rates are, and then I just put in a sheet. I said, well, what's it look like with 3% on, to make sure that those ranges were covered in what the people are making now. And then I
I did
did a
not.
4.6, and that's what the cost of living was the last time. Just not recommending anything,
Actually, the
just
mayor's
showing
the one
what
that
those
did it.
would be, to
Okay.
give you guys something. This is a starting point.
These
So-
are these the starting or the end?
That would be the end point.
Okay.
Yep, that would be the end point. And and you probably already said it when I was in the
I
other
did.
room, I just think all this needs to be absorbed and
And
just take it in, and because there are some things that I looked at this afternoon and what their purpose in that compensation policy was, there was a part in there that didn't match up with what I heard them say to me in our meeting earlier.
And we talked about it.
And,
We did.
Just talk about
and
that.
so the whole thing, you take it in and
yeah.
I made
We-
it that far through and I got stopped, so it's my fault.
And we've already scheduled a next meeting.
awesome.
Okay, so the next public service meeting will be at 7 o'clock on the 18th.
Okay.
Tuesday, the 18th.
And again, thank you for what you guys are doing. I know it's not easy, so.
So,
Getting her
I'll
done.
move to adjourn.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. You got all that, Kevin?
6:50.
I'll
Oh,
crack
thank
2
you.
copies of this out real quick and I'll
Sure.
get it back to you.
On to the next brief meeting.
Adjusting her title.
I don't know. I don't want to adjust her pay anymore.
They raised
Not
pretty good
do
money.
that. Adjust the title, make it a salary position and leave it as is.
Yep.
Sure.
Where's 189? Just getting better.
It's not back to what it was. Yeah.
Just getting better.
And it may,
5 minutes to get 2 hours.
just in general, I don't think people are social
Also,
minded.
Yeah.
It's legit. Fill out time cards. My pay.
can see that it's there.
Oh, it's really teeny tiny, huh? Right in the middle at the bottom.
Well, it is what it is. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so I'll call this meeting to order. Kevin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Babcock? Here. Mrs. Sweet?
Here.
Mr. Bear?
Here.
Mr. Whitaker?
Here.
Mr. Avery?
Here.
Mr. Hannah?
Here.
Mr. Pettit?
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum, so if you would, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And good evening, everyone. It's good to see some of the old familiar faces out there, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this joint meeting of the Village of Enid Council and the Mad River Township trustees, trustee.
Thought we might have more in a meeting.
Well, hopefully another one will show up. Yeah. The sole purpose of this meeting is to discuss and hear ideas, comments, questions of a proposed sportsplex that the village and the township are interested in. We've purchased the property. We're going to get some updates. If you would like to address the council and Mr. Pettit with the township, we'll have a period where you can do that after the updates are given, and I ask for any questions or comments from the council, then I'll give you the opportunity to speak as well. So I will turn it over to Mr. Hanna, Mr. Pettit, whoever wants to take the lead for some updates, and we'll go from there.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Hanna from with the village, and what a little bit of history on this. A year ago in January, we received a call from Trustee McClure asking if we might be interested in purchasing some property. At that point, I didn't see that we have really any use for it on such a grand magnitude of a purchase in itself. And then, as I was thinking about it later that night, I talked to Todd the next day. I talked to Tim, Mayor Howard, and the possibility of the township and the village going in together on something, I don't think really on the scale had ever been attempted before. So everybody we talked to, it seemed like they felt like that was a good idea. It was going to be right at 65 acres, and it was a Conley farm, which we're aware of now, that's lays behind Suburban Propane, which is adjacent to the park. Now, besides the ability to have a park there, that also abuts our well fields and our wellhead protection plans. So the village in itself, along with the Conleys, who kind of wanted to have it remain being non-commercial, the deal was made, and we were able to secure our well fields per se, and to move forward with this. Now, through a period of constant evolution, it seems like trying to come up with ideas on what to do. I think this is our fourth meeting that we've had on plans for the park itself. I know the township has held at least one or possibly two meetings. I think one.
Yeah, one. Yep.
Where we invited a lot of people to try to give their inputs. And to be honest, at that time, up until right now, we've had very little input from anybody or anybody showing up for the project in itself. So thanks for coming out tonight. We appreciate that. And where we are looking at the Enid Sports Park. We would like to consolidate that into a place where people are going to want to come to with their families, and with the possibility of running tournaments, whether it be for baseball, softball, soccer, any type of field sports. Football we've not really addressed, but basically if you've got a facility that will hold the soccer fields and things like that, you can, they should be multi-purpose, where you should be able to play about any type of field sports on that space-wise. So the initial idea kind of came up where I know some people said you couldn't see it on Facebook, and that was a problem really we couldn't overcome off of that. But as you see right now, we're looking at the soccer fields, and let me just give you an idea about that. This is the existing Enid Park right now. We plan on where you see the water plant and the water pumps, having two mini soccer fields there for young kids, because we can turn them sideways and get more bang for the buck off of it. So that, in addition to, we have a little bit less than a full-size soccer field that we can put here. These things were used before. I don't know if you had your kids or grandkids play several years ago, and I understand the big problem with that is that the fields aren't level, and there's a lot of problems with playability off of it. So we plan on addressing this as one of our primary objectives, to try to have a faster rollover and move on it. Back in this back corner, we've already started a bit of a playground here in Eden Park itself. We would like to have an ADA compliant playground for where the children can be not necessarily sequestered, but at least the parents can be sure that the area is somewhat restricted as far as having your children play and not having to really worry about where they may end up before it was all over. One of the big things that our initial reasoning that were our initial wants were baseball, softball fields. We looked into trying to see the best way of putting these fields out. So with the addition of these 3 soccer fields, this soccer field, having 4 baseball-sized diamonds, and at this point, I think these are roughly squared off to around 325 feet, or between 310 and 325, with this one and this one being a multi-sport or a multi-sport facility or a field. Over on these diamonds, it was requested for us to have not necessarily T-ball, but have the Little League diamonds that would be considerably smaller than what you would see here. And plus, our space is somewhat limited, so we've managed to work with Harrell and Associates to come up with basically 6 baseball, softball fields. We would like to have different fencing on these where you could bring the fencing in, bring them out, so they would be able to be playable with different age groups, different sports. So whether you want to go with 285 or something as for softball, you may want to go for 310 for a Babe Ruth league, or 3 1/4 for some of the older parts. One important thing to think of off of this deal is that we've had no affiliation with the high school or with the anything that they needed or may have promised early on. So this is strictly the township and the village at this point, and the facilities would remain like that unless there was some type of agreement that could be worked out. And I know we're talking about way in advance, but that's we would think that there'd have to be some type of agreement made with the school system before this would be opened up to them. Let me see here. We were talking about basketball, pickleball, tennis courts. You're seeing 3 tennis courts over here, or the possibility of using them for pickleball. Once we get the diameters or the schematics down as far as the playing area, that's where we plan on putting them, because they have quick access to this cul-de-sac and parking. You'll see one of the major concerns that we have as a village is the possibility and the initial thoughts about we may have to sink a well at some point in the future, or 2 wells, maybe not in my lifetime, but over an extended period. We have to have a 300-foot diameter area there that really would have no permanent construction, or it had specific rules in order to put one of those wellheads in. So what we did too is this area, as y'all know, is a flood zone. So any of the fields we want to do, we're going to have to make a significant elevation change. I'm talking about 3 to 5 feet probably. And Todd is better with this as far as on the construction side. And that's where these borrow pits or these lakes or fishing ponds eventually we would like to see will be placed. Let's see. Now going back to these fields then themselves, one situation you have when you have a multi-sport field like this is that usually it's going to have to be turf in order to have all your playing surfaces level for the different sports respectively. So our pipe dream, or one thing that we have asked for the initial quote, was to have these 2 fields with being turfed. The unfortunate side about that is that each one of the turf fields is about $1 million right now. So that's a little bit of sticker shock comes off on that one, but that would be our greatest expense at this point. And I'll be moving along here real quick. One thing we have to remember too is being in the floodplain is that there are certain requirements to have any type of fixed wall building or permanent structure has to meet certain elevation standards. And to have a concession stand restroom area back in this area, we're typically going to have to elevate that by about 8 foot. So you're talking a great amount of fill. Is that not correct, Todd?
Yeah, it has to be 8 foot to be out of
Yeah.
out of the floodplain, so.
We did have a significant, I don't want to say partner, but somebody that said, okay, if we're going to invest in this, we might want to have a place where we could gather. This is a plan for an open air, like not necessarily a gazebo, but a pavilion, I guess is one thing you would say off of it. By not having the walls there, then we can deal more with being in the flood zone, and we could conceivably have open air facilities where people can use that as we evolve. Now, that is not in any of our quotes or our financial expectations at this point. It's going to kind of come back to the individual corporation if they wanted to put that in, and it's going to be basically on their back if that's what they want to do. We would ask them to subsidize that or fund that. We'll be dealing with the Warden's ditch across here. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's a natural divider that we've got there, and because the EPA and the flood zone and other things, this thing cannot be changed. We've got certain limitations as far as to try to cross it. We do have a standing creek or a bridge that goes across right about in here, if my memory serves. So this secondary part of the park is where you'll see the dog park. So we already have plans for a dog park here. We have talked about the possibility of having people, if they wanted to farm or have a mini garden back there in that back area where we have some space. Again, this is, I don't want to say tentative because we have spent a lot of work to get it to this point, but this is our plan, this is our want, this is what we're trying to move forward in a consistent fashion. So, Tim or Todd?
Yeah. So that'll give me the pointer. One thing he was discussing was your borrow pits. These will also be used for a retention type area. My thoughts, most of you have lived here, I guess we have a lot of people who lived here most of their life. I've never seen this totally underwater. I've seen, a little bit of water, maybe a foot, 2. I'm hoping to get away with 3 foot of fill instead of 5. If it gets that wet, you don't play ball for a couple of days, I guess. I mean, if it's that wet, we just had a 3 or 4 inch rain in it. We just had about 3 or 4 inches in it.
And it'll drain well too.
Yeah, and it'll drain well. This is all going to be pit run because all these, when we dig them, everything's going to be raised with pit run, so it'll drain well. We're going to put systematic draining and everything, and hopefully be able to bring clay. And we would like to put a little bit of a buffer of clay, and then the top dirt on that. I don't know of any other thing that I wanted to discuss that you didn't cover.
Well, there'll be questions probably.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got anything, Tim? You want to?
I do not.
We can open it up to anybody who has any questions or anybody else.
Questions, comments from?
You might want to mention some of the parameters where we have issues with either the EPA or with being in the flood zone for our water purposes.
Yeah, so the second benefit, and most of you who have known me for years, my background is in water, so the part that was exciting for me was we were able to purchase this piece of property not only for the protection of our existing aquifer, but also for the potential development of a couple more wells, which we anticipate to be very good producers. That's down the road. So by planning this out now, and allowing for what the EPA likes to see, a 300-foot isolation radius, we will have the potential for future development for water supply. And, most of you know how important the water is to the village of Enon. So that is a secondary, or the way I looked at it, kind of a primary benefit. We're protecting the existing wells. We have the ability to add at least a couple wells somewhere down the road. That would be big producers for us. Got to follow EPA guidelines. We know that, We actually had them on site, was it Rick, back, last summer,
September,
maybe last
October.
fall?
September,
Yeah.
October, right.
We actually brought them out to the site, and they gave us feedback. That's why the two blue circles there, the light blue, those are the isolation radiuses that we have to deal with. But they've been very good thus far to work with and understanding how we want to develop this property, but also preserve that right to put in a couple of high-producing production wells. So let me open it up for comments or questions from the council. Any questions for Rick or Todd? Comments? Okay, let me turn it over to the public. And if you have a comment or a question or a concern, I will address you, ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address. So anybody would like to address council? Anybody? Brooke, podium. Thank you.
Brooke Whitaker. I just have a question on, I know we've talked in past about what could go over those radiuses for the future wells and what you can or can't put on fields because of that. Is there a reason if we do get turf, why a turf field then couldn't go where that one is over that diameter instead of one that we potentially will have to kill some weeds, or can turf not go over that? Is that considered permanent? Do we know?
So typically, the biggest concern is what you're going to put for weed control fertilizer within that 300-foot radius. So a possibility, if there was a development that was turf only, and also we'd have to check with the EPA, it might be fine. The typical concern, again, it's spraying stuff.
Right.
That's
And,
our
and I was
point.
saying, if
Yeah.
we by chance have the funding to do turf, maybe the primary one, as long as everything's fine, being that one that's over that well. So we don't have to worry about spraying for weeds.
We'd
Possible.
have to pull that up at some point. If we'd ever pop that second well in, the expense would, to put the turf in, would be for naught, because we'd have to essentially pull that up if we.
And that could be also a moot point, because I know we said it's come a long way with what we can put, and maybe, you know, there's EPA approved stuff that you can put to kill grass and weeds
Correct.
on the dirt part, but just a thought for future planning, if we did have that funding for turf, if it would be allowed to be over that well.
300-foot
portion.
radius.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Brooke, I misspoke, because that's big porous, so that would not have to, that would
Turf-
not be a problem as far
Yeah,
as.
turf it should be porous, yeah.
One important thing we did miss is that,
Thank you, Brooke.
yeah, the $64 million question is the funding on this. Where we are to date with two fields that would be having turf is, if you hold on a second, it's $6.3 million on the overall project. So a lot of this we're trying to do right now within house with our employees, with getting gravel, dirt, things that we can handle between the township and the village with our equipment. So we are, even though we see this astronomical figure, we're still trying to pinch pennies in order to get this thing started. So respectfully.
Thanks, Rick. Bob?
Rob Glaze, address 2050 Sundance, Springfield, in the township. I just wanted to know about the future of Enon Little League. I always wondered about that since the new school went on. So,
Jeremy, would you like to address that?
So I don't want to speak for Enon Little League. I know.
Thanks, Bob.
They have been to a couple meetings, and I think there's someone in the back that may be able to answer better. I know their intent. I don't want to say I know their intent. I believe that they would want to come down here. We're playing on Snyder Road right now, leasing fields from another community. And I think that was our intent with all of this, is to try to get the things that we used to be able to do up at Indian Valley, to get all that back here where everyone can play here. It doesn't make sense to be in another area, but, you know, we were kind of dealt the hand that we got.
Could I ask the representative to come up and please identify yourself and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Dave Fleck, 5238 West Jackson. So I'm currently the treasurer of the Little League Board. And first of all, we appreciate what y'all have done to even get this to this point. Even the prospects to have a home is exciting to us again. When the school left, we're, like Jeremy said, we're out on Snyder Road now. We're leasing those fields from National Trails. So that is a cost to us. And then losing concessions and that sort of thing has negatively impacted our ability to generate revenue, and which goes into the kids, right? So to have this possibility to have this here is really exciting. I think at this stage, obviously it's early, and some of these questions would be difficult to answer now, but I think we would just be concerned about access, both from the standpoint of field access and working with schedules, but also, that concession piece, our ability to work with that, generate revenue that way.
Sure.
And then potential tournaments in the future, because the regional, or the district, District 6, I believe is where we are, where they're always looking for places to hold tournaments, and those can bring in a lot of families, a lot of revenue, et cetera. So,
And I think that was our hope, that it would generate that type of activity.
Right.
Yeah.
And places like this, I used to work for the county and community development. Like this is gold right here. So, I'd just love to see it happen, and we'd love to be a part of that. And if there's anything that Little League can do in terms of seeking grants to help facilitate some of these costs, we would be into that as well. So, any questions that?
Questions?
In response to you, we were looking for partners or give it the pride of ownership on some of these diamonds. So that way, whether it be the Little League or whether it be a use called Babe Ruth or whatever it may be, a field that they can somewhat call their own.
Right.
So that way, they'll be more likely to keep it in a great situation. So that was one, our original goal was that part of it too. And to pull in the tournament people and to keep the proximity to I-70. We've had one person come down, and that was the only thing I kept talking about was the location, how close it was for entrance and egress off of 70 for Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton area.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one for you, Mr. Flack. Just how many fields would you like to have, or how many do you need?
Well, so we are currently using 3 fields on Snyder, and we are also using the VFW. So with our current player count, we can make that work fairly well.
2 would not be sufficient.
So the proposed 4 plus the smaller fields, that would actually be ideal.
Okay.
Because I could see we've recently this year expanded our boundaries quite a bit too. So we can actually pull players from the New Carlisle area into Springfield because there aren't sanctioned Little League organizations in those areas.
Wow.
So we've got a very large area that we can pull players in from, and if we had facilities like this, it could be an even bigger draw. We could get more families in here.
So this configuration's
Yeah, I mean, given the
Got
space
it.
that's available, I think that would be excellent. We'd really be able to work
Thank
with
you.
that.
Any other questions?
So Michael Phillips, the president of Enid Little League, he was at one of our first meetings, and we talked about the fields. And what we brought up is those smaller fields, they're not necessarily Little League, but to me, it would be the T-ball and coach pitch. You can put on those little fields that you're not having to tie up a large field that the minors and majors could play on.
Yep, and
So-
the games tend to turn faster at those fields too. So yeah, that would be really valuable to have those.
Kevin, were you able to pull up the Grand Park? Okay. We go to tournaments outside of the Dayton area, and one place in Myrtle Beach is called the Grand Park, I believe it is. They have turned most of their fields into the multi-purpose fields. Berliner, you go up there and you pay for parking every day, but that money rolls directly over into the upkeep for the park. So it's self-sustaining with having the tournaments, with having the league play, with everything else. All the money they get for the parking gets directly put into the facility. So that's another deal where we would be the tournaments would be well worth part of the process itself.
I have a question. Those fields are tournament regulation?
That would be a specific question, but I will tell you from my relative lack of experience on the board that that we've played at a lot of different fields. So really, all you have to have is the base paths and the pitching mounds lined out correctly, and they would be. You would have to. The fences don't matter as much in terms of the distance, but those would be. Yeah,
You could have
those would be
multiple, like instead of 90 feet, you could have a 90 foot, a 60 foot, a 45 foot, posts in the ground to put bases to whatever you're trying to do. And you could do the same thing with mounds.
Right. And-
We've got movable mounds now where we don't have to build dirt mounds in the middle and you're at 60 feet. We can move them into 35 feet or whatever it may be.
And we're currently doing that on Snyder right now. And even when we went to the state tournament this past year, really great facility down in Ironton, and they had a movable mound because it was a turf infield as well. So these could be very modular.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for what
much.
you do, too. Yes, sir.
Bernie Winter, to 4610 Blau Drive in Enid, Mad River Township. Several months ago, I put in a suggestion, whatever, to somebody here at this facility. I honestly don't remember the guy's name, but I asked about getting an archery range put in, and I don't know who that was. I asked about that. I don't see anything up there, so I'm assuming that either it wasn't addressed or it's been shot down, and I was just curious about that.
I don't know that I heard that discussed, so,
There's been talk of a disc golf course. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been discussed. I didn't personally have never heard of an archery range. I don't know if that'd be I don't know, maybe we could put it on the south side of the creek there, to keep it away from.
let's think about that.
sports,
It wouldn't be,
you know.
you wouldn't be using, it'd be the field tips, which are the
Yeah,
small tips,
yeah.
not the big
Right.
broadheads and all that kind of stuff, so it's relatively safe.
They do it a lot. You could do it on this end and just do it at the very
And
end.
going out that way.
Yeah.
I mean, just if you wouldn't mind, just please, consider it. See if, I don't think it's going to amount to a whole lot funding wise either, as far as
Sure.
some targets and of course, range availability and some poles to hold the targets, that kind of thing. And if it doesn't get used, you can always rededicate it for something else down the road or whatever. But I think you'd see some usage. There's not too many around that I know of anyway for people to utilize. And,
Is there one close in the area that you're aware of?
Spring Valley is the only one that I know that's
Okay.
close, and
They
that's
moved
probably
one there
what,
in Xenia. They used to have one there in Xenia.
You're right.
Is it
Xenia
still
does
there?
have
Yeah,
one.
that's the
There's,
closest one that I know.
I've been by it, and it's kind of run down.
Is it?
I think they kind of stopped putting money into it when they opened the other one up down at Spring Valley, so
Spring
it
Valley,
doesn't get much upkeep on it or whatever. But and it's still nice to have. It's a nice activity for folks
Sure.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
The other concern I have is regarding your funding issues with 6.3 million or whatever you said. My background is in wastewater and 20 years in wastewater. And throughout that time, we would always visit other plants that had upgrades done, and some of them were in the millions and millions of dollars and whatnot. And it was always an issue with the contractors battling with the city or whoever municipality building the facility or upgrading the facility or whatever. And they would put in change orders and things of that nature and stall and do everything they could to get additional money from the project and whatnot. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there in case I don't know what you're doing for oversight and all that, but if you're talking about pinching pennies, some of these contractors have their ways of
Change orders, what they